The shout cracked through the room, just as Hazel Monroe pushed herself upright, her cheeks burning hotter than the evening air. She hadn't meant to fall. 1 second she had been chasing 7-year-old Lily through the mansion's corridors, and the next she had tripped over the edge of a rug and landed squarely on the immaculate king-sized bed belonging to the one man everyone insisted was untouchable. Across from her stood Adrian Varelli, billionaire, corporate legend, leader of one of the world's most powerful mafia organizations. Around him, mafia captains, family attorneys, executives, and household staff stared as though they had witnessed a miracle or a catastrophe. No woman had ever crossed the threshold of Adrian's private bedroom. No woman had ever touched his bed. Someone whispered, "She's finished." Hazel opened her mouth to explain, but the room had already judged her. Then Adrian calmly looked past her, toward the stunned crowd. Leave. No explanation. No anger. No punishment. Only one impossible question lingered after everyone obeyed. Why would the most untouchable mafia boss protect the only woman who had broken the one rule no one else had ever dared to test? By sunrise, Hazel discovered that rumors could travel through the Varelli estate faster than sunlight. Conversations stopped whenever she walked into a room. Housekeepers suddenly found urgent reasons to dust shelves that were already spotless. Security guards politely stepped aside, yet their curious glances followed her down every hallway. Even the chefs in the enormous kitchen lowered their voices the moment she appeared. Hazel sighed. She had accepted dozens of temporary nanny assignments over the years. Wealthy families often came with complicated dynamics, but this was something entirely different. People weren't simply gossiping. They were trying to solve an impossible mystery. How had an ordinary nanny become the first woman ever seen inside Adrian Varelli's private bedroom? She carried her breakfast tray into the sunny breakfast room, where Lily was happily building towers out of strawberries and pancakes. "Good morning," Lily chirped, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Morning," Hazel answered with a smile. Before she could sit down, 2 senior housemaids entered with fresh flowers. One glanced toward Hazel. The other quickly whispered, "So it's true. I heard Mr. Varelli personally dismissed everyone." They say he didn't even look angry. The women immediately pretended to discuss flower arrangements when they realized Hazel had heard every word. Hazel gently cleared her throat. It was an accident. Both women smiled with exaggerated politeness. "Of course, Miss Monroe." Their expressions made it painfully obvious they believed exactly the opposite. Hazel resisted the urge to explain again. Some stories only grew larger each time someone denied them. Meanwhile, elsewhere inside the mansion, the same rumor reached the estate's highest-ranking staff: the head butler, senior legal advisors, corporate executives visiting for morning meetings. Even several veteran mafia captains who had served Adrian for decades exchanged skeptical looks. One captain quietly muttered, "I've seen the boss negotiate with presidents without changing expression." Another replied, "Yesterday, he looked at the nanny before he looked at us." The first captain frowned. That's even stranger. Inside Adrian's office, however, none of those whispers reached his face. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, reviewing financial reports, while his longtime advisor, Marco, hesitated beside the desk. "There is considerable discussion throughout the estate," Marco finally admitted. "I've noticed. They believe Miss Monroe is special." Adrian turned one page without lifting his eyes. "They're wrong. Should we dismiss her to end the speculation?" Silence settled between them. Marco expected the answer that every employee in the organization expected: remove the problem, restore discipline. Instead, Adrian calmly signed the document before him. "No." Marco blinked. "No, sir?" "Lily trusts her." Only 4 words. No elaborate explanation. No emotional speech. Yet everyone who knew Adrian understood the weight behind that decision. Trust was the rarest currency in his world. He never spent it carelessly. A few minutes later, Hazel found Adrian in the library, while Lily searched nearby bookshelves for a pirate adventure. Determined to end the misunderstanding, Hazel approached him. "Mr. Varelli, I think I should leave." He looked up from the file in his hands. "Why?" "Because everyone thinks—" She exhaled awkwardly. "Actually, I don't even know what everyone thinks anymore. They think rumors are facts. I'm sorry about what happened. You've apologized 3 times. And I'll probably apologize 3 more." To Hazel's surprise, the corner of Adrian's mouth almost moved. Almost. "It was an accident." She stared at him. "You're the first person who's actually said that. Because it's true." Before Hazel could answer, Lily raced between them, carrying a colorful storybook. "Hazel, Uncle Adrian, you both have to do the funny pirate voices." Neither adult noticed the elderly librarian watching from across the room. She smiled to herself. The rumors, she suspected, were only just beginning. 3 days later, the rhythm of the Varelli mansion had quietly begun to change. For years, every morning had followed the same pattern. Employees walked softly. Doors closed gently. Conversations stayed brief. The mansion was efficient, elegant, and almost painfully silent. Now laughter drifted through the hallways. It usually belonged to Lily, and it almost always meant Hazel was nearby. Instead of ordering Lily to finish breakfast, Hazel turned the meal into a game. Every bite became fuel for an imaginary explorer preparing for a dangerous expedition. Vegetables became dragon shields. Fruit became treasure gems. Within minutes, Lily finished meals that previous nannies had spent an hour negotiating. The kitchen staff watched in amazement. "She didn't even raise her voice," one chef whispered. "No," another replied. "She made eating seem like Lily's own idea." That afternoon, Hazel found Lily refusing to practice piano. Rather than insisting, Hazel sat beside the instrument and deliberately played the wrong notes. Terribly. Painfully. Lily burst into uncontrollable laughter. "That's not how it goes." "Really?" Hazel asked, with exaggerated innocence. "Then you'll have to teach me." 5 minutes later, Lily was happily correcting every mistake. From the second-floor balcony, Adrian paused outside his study. He had intended to continue reviewing contracts. Instead, he found himself listening. Not to the piano, to Lily laughing. It had been a long time since he had heard that sound echo through the mansion, without forcing a smile in return. He remained there for nearly a minute, before quietly walking away, though the melody followed him down the corridor. The household noticed. The boss no longer hurried past the family wing. Sometimes he stopped. Sometimes he simply listened. No one dared mention it, except Lily. At dinner that evening, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "Uncle Adrian?" "Yes?" "You've been smiling more." Several servants nearly dropped the serving dishes. Adrian calmly cut another piece of steak. "Have I?" "Mm-hmm." Lily nodded with complete confidence, not a big smile. She pinched her fingers barely an inch apart. A tiny one. Hazel hid a laugh behind her water glass. "I think Lily has quite the imagination." "No," Lily declared. "I have evidence." "Oh?" Hazel asked. "You stayed to hear me practice piano yesterday." Adrian looked surprisingly caught. "I was passing by." "For 63 seconds." Hazel blinked. "You counted?" "I count everything." Neither adult had an answer to that. The staff exchanged subtle glances. If the boss was being defeated in conversation by a 7-year-old, perhaps the rumors were stranger than anyone realized. Lily, however, had moved on to a brand new mission. She had decided, with absolute certainty, that Hazel and Adrian belonged together. Unfortunately for everyone involved, she possessed the planning skills of a tiny general and the patience of absolutely no one. The following morning, she invited Hazel to help her build a puzzle in the family lounge. Then she marched into Adrian's office. "Uncle, I need your help." "With what?" "It's very serious." Within seconds, Adrian followed her, only to discover Hazel already sitting on the carpet surrounded by hundreds of puzzle pieces. Lily clapped happily. "Now we're a team." Hazel smiled. "I'm not sure assembling a castle puzzle requires the CEO of a global corporation." Lily shook her head. "It needs 3 people. It clearly has only 200 pieces." "Exactly." Adrian recognized the trap immediately. Hazel did not. He silently accepted defeat and sat opposite her. For 20 minutes, the 3 of them searched for tiny blue pieces that all looked exactly alike. Whenever Adrian reached toward the center of the puzzle, Hazel instinctively reached for the same piece. Their hands brushed. Both immediately pulled back. "Sorry," Hazel said. "My mistake," Adrian replied. Lily looked from one adult to the other with exaggerated disappointment. "That was your chance." "Our chance for what?" Hazel asked. "To hold hands." Hazel nearly dropped an entire section of the puzzle. "Lily!" "What?" the little girl asked innocently. "That's what happens in movies." Adrian cleared his throat with unusual determination. "We are building a castle." "Not a romance," Lily shrugged. "You can build both." Even Adrian couldn't respond to that. Later that evening, the security team replayed hallway footage while investigating an unrelated delivery. One guard accidentally noticed Adrian carrying the completed puzzle to Lily's bedroom himself instead of asking a servant. The guard frowned. "When did the boss start doing things like that?" His partner answered without looking up. "About the same time the nanny arrived." Neither realized that the greatest transformation inside the Varelli mansion had nothing to do with gossip anymore. It was happening quietly. One laugh, one shared meal, one awkward conversation at a time. By the end of the first week, everyone inside the Varelli estate had noticed something unusual. Adrian Varelli had started asking questions, not about mergers, not about security, not about mafia business, about Lily. More specifically, about Hazel's opinion of Lily. The first time, no one thought much of it. Adrian stopped Hazel in the hallway after breakfast. "Miss Monroe." She turned. "Yes, Mr. Varelli?" "Lily has recently begun reading before bed instead of asking for cartoons. She discovered she likes adventure stories." He nodded thoughtfully. "Would that habit be beneficial?" Hazel smiled. "It certainly won't hurt." "Good." He walked away. The entire conversation lasted less than 20 seconds. Yet 3 members of the household staff watched it from different corners of the corridor. One whispered, "The boss owns publishing companies." Another replied, "He's asking the nanny whether books are good for children." The third simply muttered, "We've entered a strange timeline." 2 days later, Adrian appeared in the kitchen while Hazel helped Lily decorate homemade cookies. The executive chef nearly dropped an expensive mixing bowl. The boss never visited the kitchen. Ever. Adrian looked at Hazel. "I have a question." Hazel wiped flour from her hands. "Of course. Lily says children concentrate better after baking. They often do. Measuring ingredients teaches patience, and decorating lets them be creative." "I see." A brief silence followed. Hazel waited. "So," Adrian finally asked, "should there be more cookies?" She blinked. "I don't think anyone has ever asked me that so seriously." To her surprise, Adrian almost smiled again. "I prefer informed decisions." Hazel laughed. The sound echoed through the kitchen. Several cooks exchanged wide-eyed glances. The boss had made a joke. A tiny one, but still a joke. Later that afternoon, 2 veteran security officers leaned against the monitoring room doorway. "You owe me $20, one said. "For what?" I told you he'd find another excuse to talk to her before sunset. That wasn't talking. He asked about cookies. Exactly. The first guard grinned. He could have asked the chef. He asked the nanny. Word spread quickly. Soon the butlers, gardeners, chauffeurs, and kitchen staff had created an entirely unofficial betting pool. Not about whether Adrian liked Hazel. Everyone agreed that part was becoming obvious. The bets concerned one question only. How many days would it take before Adrian admitted it? The guesses ranged from 3 days to 3 years. Marco, Adrian's longtime advisor, refused to participate. I enjoy continued employment, he explained. Meanwhile, Hazel remained blissfully unaware. To her, Adrian simply seemed like an uncle, trying very hard to reconnect with a little girl who had lost far too much too soon. Whenever he asked another question, she answered sincerely. When he wondered whether Lily should have a stricter bedtime, Hazel explained why predictable routines mattered more than harsh rules. When he asked whether children remembered ordinary afternoons, she answered gently, "They rarely remember perfect schedules. They remember how safe they felt." Adrian said nothing. But later that evening, he cancelled a late business dinner and spent an hour helping Lily assemble a model spaceship. The spaceship eventually lost one wing. Glue somehow ended up in Adrian's hair. Lily laughed so hard she hiccuped. Hazel quietly handed Adrian a damp towel. I've never seen a billionaire lose an argument with craft glue. He accepted the towel. I underestimated the glue. I think the glue won. I believe you're right. Their eyes met for a brief second, before both looked away. Neither noticed Lily watching them over the crooked spaceship. She sighed dramatically. They're so slow. What was that? Hazel asked. Nothing. Lily folded her arms like a disappointed movie director. I just thought grown-ups would understand obvious things faster. That evening, she revised her strategy. If puzzles and baking had failed, perhaps music would work. The next morning, she secretly signed both Hazel and Adrian up for the mansion's weekend charity talent rehearsal. Unfortunately, she forgot one tiny detail. Neither of them could sing. When the rehearsal schedule reached the staff office, laughter spread through the building faster than any rumor ever had. For the first time in years, people weren't whispering about fear. They were eagerly waiting to see whether the most intimidating mafia boss in the country would survive a duet with the curvy Nanny, who still had absolutely no idea he was inventing reasons just to spend a few extra minutes near her. The annual Varelli Foundation Charity Gala was one of the few occasions when Adrian opened the doors of his private estate to distinguished guests. Corporate leaders, government officials, philanthropists, international partners. Every guest expected flawless organization. No one expected the evening's biggest topic to be the nanny. Hazel had no intention of attending the reception itself. She had simply accompanied Lily, who had spent the previous week helping create colorful drawings that would be displayed in the children's education exhibit, sponsored by the foundation. She wore a simple navy blue dress. Elegant, comfortable, entirely appropriate for a professional caregiver. Yet the moment she entered the gallery, conversations quietly shifted. There she is, the woman from the bedroom. I heard the boss personally requested she attend. The last rumor wasn't true, but by now, facts mattered far less than imagination. Hazel ignored the whispers and knelt beside Lily, carefully straightening one of the little girl's drawings before the guests arrived. "You did wonderful work," she said. Lily beamed. "I think Uncle Adrian will like this one." "I'm sure he will." Across the room, Adrian had just finished greeting several international investors when his eyes instinctively searched for Lily. Instead, they landed on Hazel. She was laughing softly as she helped Lily wipe a streak of paint from her own sleeve. Nothing dramatic, nothing glamorous, just kindness. For reasons Adrian couldn't explain, it became the moment he remembered most from the entire evening. Unfortunately, someone else noticed exactly where he was looking. Bianca Castelli. As director of the Varelli Foundation, Bianca had organized the gala for years. Elegant, intelligent, and admired by everyone present, she had long been regarded as the woman most likely to stand beside Adrian one day. Until the rumors began. At first, she had dismissed them as ridiculous gossip. Now, she watched Adrian smiling, an expression so rare that entire board meetings passed without seeing it. And he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the nanny. The realization stung far more than Bianca expected. Later that evening, while several guests admired the children's artwork, Bianca approached Hazel with a polished smile. "Miss Monroe." "Ms. Castelli, I've heard quite a lot about you," Hazel answered pleasantly. "I imagine you've heard more than I have." A few nearby guests chuckled. Bianca's smile tightened. "I do hope you understand how important professional boundaries are when working for influential families." The surrounding conversation faded. People pretended to examine paintings while quietly listening. Hazel understood exactly what Bianca was implying. She could have defended herself. She could have repeated the truth for the 100th time. Instead, she remained calm. "I've always believed that caring for a child with honesty is the most important professional boundary." Bianca tilted her head. Some people might define boundaries differently. Before Hazel could respond, another voice entered the conversation. The only person who crossed a boundary. The room turned. Adrian had walked over without anyone noticing. His expression remained perfectly composed. "Was my niece." Silence settled over the gallery. Bianca frowned. Adrian continued evenly. "Lily locked Miss Monroe inside my bedroom while playing hide-and-seek. Several executives exchanged startled glances. Hazel looked at Adrian in surprise. He had never publicly addressed the incident before. "It was an accident," he said simply. "Nothing more. No raised voice. No dramatic speech. Just a quiet statement from a man whose words carried enough authority to end arguments before they began." No one spoke. Because no one could. Bianca's confidence faltered for the first time all evening. She realized too late that Adrian had not merely defended Hazel. He had chosen to protect her reputation in front of every influential guest in the room. Hazel met Adrian's eyes for a brief moment. "Thank you," she said softly. He gave a slight nod. "You shouldn't have needed defending." Those 6 words lingered long after the music resumed. Around the ballroom, the whispers returned. Only this time, they sounded very different. People were no longer asking whether the mysterious nanny had broken the mafia boss's strictest rule. They were beginning to wonder why Adrian Varelli cared so deeply about making sure no one believed she ever had. The charity gala ended, but the conversations it sparked refused to. For the first time since Hazel had arrived at the Varelli estate, the rumors had split into 2 camps. One group accepted Adrian's explanation immediately. The other insisted the mafia boss had simply invented a story to protect the woman he secretly cared about. Ironically, the truth sounded less believable than the gossip. Hazel decided there was little she could do. Children needed consistency. Adults, she was learning, often preferred entertaining stories to ordinary facts. The following afternoon, Lily organized what she proudly called an official thank you tea party for everyone who had helped with the charity event. The guests included housekeepers, gardeners, chefs, security officers, office assistants, Marco, Bianca, Adrian, and of course, Hazel. The dining room buzzed with relaxed conversation. For once, business reports and security briefings had been replaced by homemade cookies and children's lemonade. Hazel watched Lily proudly carry a tray from one guest to another. "You've become quite the hostess," Hazel said. "I learned from you." The answer warmed Hazel's heart. Then Lily stopped beside Bianca. "I have something important to tell everyone." The room gradually fell silent. Bianca smiled politely. "What is it, Lily?" The little girl took a deep breath, completely unaware that half the room still remembered the bedroom scandal. "I need to apologize." Several adults exchanged puzzled looks. Hazel looked up from her teacup. "Lily? I was the one who locked Hazel in Uncle Adrian's bedroom." The sentence landed like a stone in still water. No one spoke. Lily continued with the complete honesty only a 7-year-old could possess. "We were playing hide and seek. I wanted the best hiding place. So I pushed Hazel inside, closed the door, and held the handle." Hazel couldn't help smiling despite herself. "You certainly forgot to mention that part." "I know." Lily lowered her head. "I thought it was funny." It wasn't. The room remained perfectly still. I let go when I heard Uncle Adrian coming. Hazel slipped because she was trying to catch me. And then she fell on the bed. She looked around innocently. It was all my fault. One by one, every person present replayed that evening in their mind. The panicked shouting, the impossible assumptions, the whispered accusations, the endless speculation. All because a mischievous little girl had decided to win a game of hide and seek. Bianca slowly set down her teacup. For the first time since meeting Hazel, she found herself unable to meet the nanny's eyes. Every implication she had made, every carefully chosen remark, every public suggestion about professional boundaries, collapsed in a matter of seconds. Not because Adrian had defended Hazel, because Lily had unknowingly destroyed every false narrative with one simple confession. Hazel walked over and knelt beside the little girl. "You made a mistake." Lily nodded tearfully. "I'm sorry." "And what do we do after making mistakes? We tell the truth. And we try to make things right." Hazel smiled. "Exactly." She hugged Lily gently. "There isn't a child in the world who has never made a mistake." Watching them, Adrian realized something unexpected. Hazel's first instinct had never been to protect herself. It had been to protect Lily from unnecessary guilt. That single moment revealed more about her character than weeks of observation ever could. He slowly stood. Every conversation stopped. People instinctively looked toward him. When Adrian Varelli spoke in public, everyone listened. He turned toward Hazel. "Miss Monroe." She rose to her feet. "Yes, Mr. Varelli?" For a brief moment, the most powerful man in the room seemed to choose each word with unusual care. "I owe you an apology." Surprise spread through the room. Adrian continued calmly. "I knew the truth from the beginning. I also believed the rumors would eventually disappear on their own." He paused. "I was wrong." The silence grew even heavier, because I remained silent. "You carried the burden of assumptions that should never have been yours." Hazel blinked, genuinely caught off guard. "You never asked for any of it. I should have ended the speculation sooner." No one present had ever witnessed Adrian apologize publicly, not to an executive, not to a politician, not even to longtime associates. Yet here he stood, apologizing to a nanny with complete sincerity. Hazel smiled softly. "I accepted this job to help Lily feel safe. I never expected protecting my own reputation would become part of it. I'm just glad the truth finally caught up." Adrian held her gaze. "So am I." It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It didn't need to be. The respect in his eyes was unmistakable. Around the room, people noticed something that had nothing to do with rumors anymore. The mafia boss no longer looked at Hazel as someone he had merely defended. He looked at her as someone whose integrity he deeply admired. And admiration, everyone quietly realized, was often where love began. 2 weeks passed far faster than anyone expected. The emergency surgery had gone well. Lily's mother was recovering steadily, and Hazel's temporary contract had quietly reached its final morning. She folded the last of her clothes into a modest suitcase while the early sunlight streamed through the guest room window. There was no drama, no grand speech, just the familiar routine of a professional who had always understood one simple truth. Children eventually grew, families healed, and nannies moved on. Hazel looked around the room one final time before gently closing her suitcase. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." The door opened just enough for Lily to peek inside. "You packed already?" Hazel smiled. "I did." The little girl's face immediately fell. "So, you're really leaving?" Hazel knelt until they were at eye level. "We always knew this was temporary." "I don't like temporary." "I know." Lily wrapped both arms around Hazel without another word. Hazel hugged her tightly, wishing she could somehow make goodbyes easier for children. Unfortunately, no one had ever discovered that secret. The household gathered in the entrance hall before lunch. Housekeepers hugged Hazel. The chefs packed enough homemade pastries to feed an entire neighborhood. The gardeners handed her a small pot of white lilies because Lily insisted they were now the official flower of friendship. Even the usually expressionless security guards wished her well. Marco approached with a polite smile. "I've worked here for 18 years. Hazel looked at him curiously. "I've never seen this house feel lighter." She laughed softly. "I think that was Lily." Marco shook his head. "No. It was someone who reminded everyone that kindness doesn't make people weaker. It makes them easier to come home to." Hazel thanked him quietly. Then she turned toward Adrian. He stood exactly as he always did. Perfect posture, calm expression, hands folded behind his back. Only his eyes betrayed the storm he refused to show. "Thank you for trusting me with Lily," Hazel said. "You gave her something I couldn't." She smiled. "I only listened." "You did more than that." For several long seconds, neither said anything else. Some conversations became too important for easy words. Finally, Hazel extended her hand. "It was a pleasure working for you, Mr. Varelli." Adrian looked at her hand for the briefest moment, before gently shaking it. The pleasure was ours. Simple, respectful, professional. Exactly as both of them believed it should remain. Hazel climbed into the waiting taxi. Lily waved until the car disappeared beyond the estate gates. Only then did Adrian quietly return inside. The mansion changed overnight. Breakfast became silent again. The kitchen prepared beautiful meals that somehow tasted ordinary. The family lounge remained perfectly tidy because no one scattered puzzle pieces across the carpet anymore. No terrible piano concerts echoed through the halls. No imaginary dragons attacked vegetables during lunch. No one laughed because someone had accidentally glued their fingers together. 3 days later, Adrian paused outside the library. Without thinking, he waited. He expected to hear Hazel reading pirate stories with exaggerated voices. Instead, silence. He continued walking. The silence followed him. That evening, Lily pushed peas around her dinner plate. "I'm not hungry." "You've barely eaten." "I know." She looked toward Hazel's empty chair. "The house is lonely." Adrian instinctively glanced at the same chair. He hated how quickly he understood exactly what she meant. Another 4 days passed. Executives noticed Adrian finishing meetings earlier than usual. Security officers observed him wandering through the family wing for no obvious reason. Even Marco recognized the pattern. One afternoon, he entered Adrian's office carrying several documents. "You've reviewed this contract 3 times." Adrian looked up. "Have I? And you've signed nothing." A long silence settled between them. Marco carefully closed the office door. "May I ask you something? Not as your advisor." Adrian nodded once. "What exactly are you trying not to admit?" Adrian leaned back slowly. For the first time in many years, the answer didn't arrive immediately. Finally, he spoke. When Hazel arrived, the house became louder. Marco smiled. "It certainly did. I thought I missed the noise." "You don't." Adrian looked toward the window. I miss the person who created it. The realization landed with surprising clarity. He hadn't begun caring because of one embarrassing accident, nor because of endless rumors, nor because she had accidentally become the first woman to fall onto his bed. He cared because she had never once tried to become someone else. She never chased influence, never flirted for advantage, never treated him differently because the world feared him. She simply cared for Lily. And somehow, without trying, she had begun caring for everyone else too, including him. Marco quietly smiled. I was wondering how long it would take. The following Saturday morning, Hazel unlocked the door to a small building she had recently rented. It wasn't glamorous. Fresh paint still covered the walls. Several shelves remained empty. Cardboard boxes filled the corners. But every inch of the space represented a dream she had quietly saved for over a decade. A childcare learning center. A place where children could feel curious instead of pressured. Where parents could learn alongside them. Where kindness mattered as much as achievement. She was arranging tiny chairs around a reading corner when someone knocked. Assuming it was a delivery driver, she called without looking up. It's open. The door swung inward. Polished black shoes stepped across the threshold. Hazel froze. Adrian stood there alone. No security team. No assistants. No chauffeurs waiting behind him. Just Adrian. What are you doing here? She asked, unable to hide her surprise. I wanted to see something. She glanced around the unfinished room. It isn't much yet. I disagree. He slowly walked through the space, stopping beside a low bookshelf, waiting to be filled. I think this may become someone's favorite place. Hazel smiled. I hope so. A quiet silence settled between them. Comfortable. Unforced. Finally, Adrian faced her. When your contract ended, I told myself Lily was the one who would miss you. Hazel listened without interrupting. I was wrong. His voice remained calm, steady, but more honest than she had ever heard. The house missed you. He took another step closer. Lily missed you. A faint smile crossed his face. And I discovered. So did I. Hazel's heartbeat quickened. Adrian continued. Somewhere between protecting your reputation and watching you care for my family, I began imagining a future. He paused. A future that included you. Hazel searched his face. There was no performance, no charm, no carefully rehearsed declaration, only quiet sincerity. She laughed softly, through gathering tears. You know, for a man who negotiates billion-dollar agreements, that was a very nervous confession. I've never negotiated anything more important. She stepped closer. You also forgot to ask something. His eyebrows lifted slightly. What? Hazel smiled. Whether I could imagine the same future. And can you? She looked into the eyes of the man the world feared. The man who had never tried to impress her, only to respect her. I already have. For the first time, Adrian Varelli stopped hiding his smile. It wasn't small. It wasn't restrained. It was warm, completely genuine. Hazel reached for his hand. This time, neither of them pulled away. 6 months later, the Monroe Learning Center officially opened its doors. The building was filled with children's laughter, colorful books, music, and families eager to learn together. Adrian never bought the center, never secretly paid its expenses, never tried to turn Hazel's dream into his achievement. Instead, the Varelli Foundation became its largest public partner, openly sponsoring scholarships for children whose families needed help. Whenever reporters praised Adrian's generosity, he redirected every compliment toward Hazel's work. During the grand opening, one journalist grinned knowingly. So, Mr. Varelli, did your love story really begin the day Miss Monroe fell onto your bed? The crowd laughed. Hazel covered her face with embarrassed amusement. Adrian looked at her before answering. Then he smiled. No, it began the moment she stood back up, without trying to become someone she wasn't. Hazel laughed through happy tears. Months earlier, one ridiculous accident had convinced an entire estate that her reputation was ruined forever. Instead, it became the first step toward finding a family she had never expected, a love she had never pursued, and the happiest chapter of her life.